Alors, me revient l'honneur
So I have the
d'accueillir
honor
aujourd'hui.
to welcome
Bonjour mesdames,
you
bonjour messieurs.
today.
Très heureux,
Hello,
très fier de
ladies and
vous accueillir
gentlemen. We're
ici
very
chez
happy and proud
TotalEnergies
to welcome you at
pour
Total
cet
Energy
événement sur
for
l'humanité et
this
l'inclusion, mais plus
event
déploiement
dedicated
international
to the
des
international
politiques de handicap.
deployment of our
Comme
disability
beaucoup d'entreprises,
policies.
et comme je pense beaucoup
As many
de vos
companies
entreprises,
and as
nous
many
avons
of your
fait chez
companies,
TotalEnergies de
at
l'inclusion
Total Energy,
un des
we
fondements de notre politique sociale,
decided
notre
to
politique
make
RH.
inclusion one of the foundations of
L'idée
our
d'être
social and
de faire
HR
en sorte que chacun puisse
policies.
être reconnu pour
We
ce qu'il
wanted
est, pour
everyone
sa
to be
singularité,
recognized for what
et
they
qu'il aide
are, for their
aussi chacun
singularity, and so
à en
that
être ainsi, faire reconnaître tous les autres.
everyone
C'est
feels
effectivement au cœur de
comfortable.
notre politique
It is at the
pour les femmes
heart
et
of
les
our
hommes
policy, both
de
for
la
men
compagnie.
and women in our
Voilà, pour faire
company.
simple, je dirais qu'on veut être
To
riche
cut a long
de nos
story
différences,
short, I would say that
on
we
est
want to be
intimement
rich
persuadé que
with our
c'est la
differences,
meilleure
and we are
réponse
fully
pour faire face à
convinced
la
that this is
complexité
the
du
best
monde.
answer to face the complexity
Et
of the
donc,
world.
l'inclusion des personnes en situation de handicap, bien
Inclusion
évidemment, est au
for
centre
people
de cette
suffering from
politique. Alors,
disability
nous sommes
is
assez
at the
fiers,
core of these policies.
notamment
We
des
are rather
résultats en
proud
France en
for our
2022.
results in
On a pu
France in
atteindre 6% de taux
2022.
d'emploi
We reached
mondial
6%
pour
of
ce métier.
employment for
On a
disabled
aussi
people, so we
signé
can be proud.
un
We
magnifique
also
accord à
signed
l'unanimité
a
avec nos
very
partenaires
nice unanimous
pour la période
agreement with our social
2023-2025,
partners
une fois
for
aussi bénéficiaire.
2023
Mais
to
on a comme but
2025. Again,
aussi
we're very
cet
proud.
enjeu de
But
déployer nos politiques
the challenge is also
de
to roll
situation de
out
handicap à
these
l'international.
policies
Donc on a
internationally.
41 filiales qui ont
We have
adhéré à cette
41
décision de
subsidiaries who
conjointe.
adhered to the
Et voilà, c'est une volonté
International
de
Work
notre
Bureau.
côté.
We are
C'est
operating
un
in
travail
130
long et fort
countries.
qui va
It is
être
a
réalisé dans
long
les prochaines
work.
années, mais on travaille déjà très
We are already working
donc
on
le sujet
this, so
d'aujourd'hui est un
that's
sujet
why
de
it
cœur
is your
pour
topic today,
nos
and it is,
entreprises.
as I said, at the core of all
Et
our
puis, je dirais
challenges.
qu'une des pratiques,
I would
alors je pense
also
que vous allez
say
certainement
that
en
one
parler,
of our
une
practices, and
l'approche que
you'll
nous
talk
avons
about that, one of our
c'est de faire en
approaches
sorte que toutes ces
was
filiales
to make
puissent
sure that all
échanger
our
leurs meilleures pratiques.
subsidiaries be able to exchange
Nous avions à
and
l'occasion de la journée
best
internationale
practices.
du
So
handicap
on the occasion of
tenue le
the
5 janvier
Disability
dernier,
Day on the 5th of
qui m'a permis
December
rapidement de
last, even if it was on a
cette
Saturday
activité que
3rd,
vous suivez d'une façon générale.
we didn't
Voilà,
ask
on a
anyone to
partagé
come on a
un guide
Saturday,
de bonnes
but
pratiques
we shared
également.
a guide
Je
for
pense
good
que faire
practices
ensemble, c'est
among all
clairement
our
que partager les
subsidiaries.
bonnes
We
pratiques,
really
c'est
think that
enrichir
sharing these good
l'initiative
practices
des autres et puis
is
pourquoi pas se sentir
a way of
plus
getting richer with
au
the initiatives of
cœur
each and
de
everyone.
notre
And you're not
démarche et que
alone
aussi de
in
la
this
démarche
approach. It is
manifeste.
at the core of our
Et
approach and at the
c'est ce
core
qui nous a
of the
motivé à le faire.
manifeste
Donc
inclusion
rapidement ce que je
as
voulais dire en
well.
introduction,
So briefly, this is what I wanted
merci
to
de
say in
l'accueil.
my introduction. But
Nous avons
first of
grand
all, I
plaisir à
wanted
vous
to
accueillir.
welcome you. And I repeat, we have great
Déjà un
pleasure
siège
in
ici
welcoming you
depuis
in
notre
this
création
rather
et on
older
sera
tower.
fin
But
2025
if you're
dans la
patient,
nouvelle
we'll
salle
invite you
d'interprétation
again at the
avec
end of
plus d'accessibilité.
2025 in the new one we are building
Voilà,
with even
merci
more
beaucoup.
accessibility for people suffering from disabilities. Thank you.
Merci, cher Patrick,
Thank
de nous accueillir
you,
dans un
my
lieu
dear
qui est
Patrice,
peut-être
for
ancien, mais
hosting us
qui est
in
à
an
la fois
old
prestigieux
tower, but it is a
et moderne.
prestigious
Je
location
regarde
and
autour de
also
moi.
full of modernity if I
Bonjour
look
à
around
tous, à
me.
tous ceux qui sont
Good
là
evening,
devant moi, et tous ceux
everyone,
qui
for
sont
those who are
derrière
with us
leurs
in this
écrans.
room and to all
Je
those
tout
who
à
are
fait
following
apprécié.
us
Dans
on
l'Union
screen.
européenne,
In the
une
European
personne sur
Union,
6 dit avoir
one
un problème
person
de
out of
santé
6
ou de
says
handicap de longue durée,
she or he suffers
avec des
from
nuances
health
selon
issues or long-term
la
handicap,
représentation
with the
culturelle du
differences
handicap, selon les
depending on the
spécificités
cultural
selon.
presentation of the
Il y a
handicap
néanmoins
and
un point
according
commun, une
the care
tendance
systems. But
globale,
there is
qui est le
one
passage de
common point, a
conception
global trend,
médicale du
which is
handicap
going from a
tournée vers des
medical
compensations
approach of
vers
handicap,
une
looking for
approche
compensation,
d'intégration
toward
par le
a
travail
more
et par la
integration
formation.
approach through work and
Si les
training.
conceptions se rapprochent,
If
notamment dans
the
l'UE,
approaches got
les
closer,
réglementations
notably in the
existantes sont
EU,
encore très
rules
différentes
and systems
et
are,
une
however,
hétérogénéité
different.
est encore
There
plus
is
forte
a
si on se
big
tourne vers le
difference
droit
if we
international, c'est-à-dire le droit de
look
l'Union.
outside
Les
the
entreprises qui ont
EU
une politique
borders.
globale qui veulent
Companies
élargir
having a
les politiques
global
handicap sont donc
policy and that
confrontées à de
want
grandes
to
difficultés,
understand their
grandes disparités,
disability
et elles
policy
doivent
face a lot of
progressivement
difficulties and
intégrer et
disparities.
résoudre de
They
manière
have
cohérente et
progressively
respectueuse
to adapt
ces
and
cultures. Ce n'est
consistently
pas alors, il relève des missions du manifeste
have
d'inclusion,
cultures
dont
got
on se rappelle
together.
qu'il est né de la
So in
mobilisation
our
des organisations
manifesto that was
professionnelles,
born from
d'accompagner
the job
ces
of company
ambitions par
managers
un
to
intéressement.
support all these
C'est la
social
vocation de
ambitions
ce travail qui
internationally.
vise à
And this is the
faciliter
aim
l'engagement
of
des
the
politiques de handicap.
internationalization work working party. This working party was launched in January this year. It is co-piloted by Anne Chandler, Deputy Director of the Disability Group of Capgemini, and Christine Hameau, who is in charge of the Handicap Working Group at TotalEnergies. I want to thank the 14 companies that made up this working group. It is taking a lot of work. Air France, BNP Paribas, Capgemini, NG, Generali, Renault, L'Oréal, LVMH, Orange, Safran, Steph, Thales, TotalEnergies, Webstone. So quite a number of people. Thank you to this group that is very useful to our community. The objective of this group is to work together to exchange on good practices about the rolling out of disability policies in foreign subsidiaries, taking into account, of course, the differences connected to each activity sectors or to the cultural perception of disability or to the legislation of each country. All works and comments of these groups are then shared with the members of this Inclusion Manifesto via the website. You all know this conference is the first one we are organizing on this topic. It is the epitome, really. We wanted to share with you concrete examples of companies that are more or less advanced on that topic. The objective was to create some inspiration for the deployment and export of your disability policy. If this is of interest, of course, we'll have other testimonies in 2023. A satisfaction questionnaire will be sent to you after this conference, as well as a replay and a summary. You will also have an English-speaking version that you'll be able to share with your collaborators. Internationally, of course. It'll be available right in January. We hope that this conference will be of interest to you and will inspire you. Our objective for 2023 is also to set up the third edition of the Inclusive Company Trophy. Already in March, you'll be able to share your initiatives around the employment of disabled people. And of course, you are all invited to send a file. So the team, the steering committee, Jean-Pierre Letarte and myself would like to wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year for next year, and above all, a very nice conference, but I am very trustful in that. So equal opportunity for everyone, for Kendry, who is going to moderate this conference. I will give him the floor now. Thank you very much to all of you. Mr. Sanchez has just talked about brilliant moderation. I hope he was not wrong, putting some pressure on me. Now, I will call upon my panelists to join me on stage. I can introduce them when they are next to me. Please be seated. So I'm very pleased to introduce Marie-Pierre Arzoumanian. She is VP HR Manager Long Haul International at Air France KLM. We have Camille Manceau, Head of Group Diversity and Inclusion, People and ESG at TotalEnergies. We have Jean-Rémy Touzé, Inclusion and Disability Officer. I like the mix of French and English, very pleasant, working for LVMH. And Camille Manceau, Head of Group Diversity and Inclusion. Sorry, already mentioned her. I should stop drinking. Karine Vasselin, Diversity and Inclusion Director, Capgemini, Group CSR. Okay, so for those of you who are familiar with the inclusion of disabled people, you often heard about the classic marketing that according to which people suffering from disability are a source of innovation, creativity, that people are considered as unquestionable markers for inclusion policies of large companies. Now, I do think that we are talking about real and valid aspects, but when we look at the percentages of employment for people suffering from disabilities in company, whatever the size of the company and activity sectors, and whatever their legacy, I would say, in terms of inclusion, we're far from it. So the question could be, maybe it's time to reimagine the approach we are having of how we integrate people suffering from disabilities in work. And one of the objectives of our discussion this evening is to open new doors, to try and bring new light onto those policies that work, those that do not work, that needs to be modified, kept, and those policies that do take into account the complex aspects of inclusion, whether the cultural aspects, legislative aspects, but also the difficulties that are connected to stereotypes. We shouldn't hide these. They really must be faced, really, if we want to be successful. Sorry for my English, says the French speaker. So we will be starting talking about these disability policies. I do think that such a policy that does work rather well needs to have an operational structure that is operational before we start hiring people suffering from disability in a more positive, aggressive, dynamic way. This strategy was used by IBM, my former employer, started already in 1995, when the American Disability Act was adopted. And this is the strategy they call the 3 A's for accessibility, accommodation, and attitude. It means how to optimally interact with people living with a handicap in a professional environment. Most companies, unfortunately, having a lot of energy and enthusiasm, sometimes forget to set up these 3 fundamental pillars before interacting with people suffering from disabilities actively. And I think that the panelists here will confirm this. Experiences and experiments can be negative both for employees and employers if the basics are not set up. So I would like to hear from the panelists, well, their opinions really regarding their own experience in their activity sectors, what worked, if they considered the development of policies to set up an operational structure for the integration of disability, of disabled people. So I will start with Capgemini. What were your main motivations for the integration of people suffering from disability? Did you look at legislation, or was it a purely legal motivation, or was there something that was already integrated in the company's DNA? Thank you for giving me the floor, Yves. Well, we wanted, right from the beginning, as we wanted to internationalize our policy supporting people from disabilities, wanted to be as inclusive as possible from a cultural standpoint, and rather rapidly wanted to have a global approach. We don't want to be trapped into a legal debate, because rapidly we knew that it would be difficult to solve such a debate. So instead of having doing a comparison of definitions in all countries, wanted to have a global approach focusing onto our strong convictions and values, as we wanted to make sure that people suffering from disabilities, chronic diseases, or suffering from neuro challenges had the same access opportunities and could join our company so as to develop a normal career as would any other colleague. So we have 5 principles that are implemented throughout the group. First principle, we first consider people as individuals and not through their disability, because we have a series of disabilities and each is different. The second principle is that instead of using phrases like disabilities or handicap, we talk about differences or other types of abilities and skills, because most of the time we realize that beyond their professional skills and competencies, these people have developed some compensation approaches to develop other types of competencies. Third, we also wanted to say that in our digital sector and after COVID, we now have a possible window to break the physical accessibility barriers. Thus, we have more opportunities to integrate people. And finally, what is key here is to evolve and change our practices and processes together with people suffering from disabilities and not for them, because otherwise we may have a kind of paternalistic approach, nothing inclusive at all. And these people have to be associated so that we can adapt to their needs and expectations. And fifth principle, everything we're doing in order to retain employment and to develop accessibility is for a much broader population than these people suffering from disabilities, because more flexibility is for the benefit of each and everyone. Thank you, Karine. I do think that one of the keys and values of our group here is that we are all representing a different activity sector. And as Karine was saying, IT and information technologies, generally speaking, are a sector that is more likely to integrate people having a certain level of education in a digital company. But I would also like to hear Marie-Pierre in a totally different sector, logistics and transportation. Given what Karine has just said, are these 5 principles similar to what you are having at Air France, or the fact that you are working in a different activity sector needs to have a different approach? Well, no. This idea of value and not to just meet a legal obligation, because if we just have this legal obligation in mind, there are so many different approaches, sometimes oppositions between the values and what the legislation of some countries are planning, the values of Air France KLM and what is taking place in some countries. Of course, we cannot just use this legislation. Similarly, I would say that we are rather humble. The idea here is to be as near as possible to the needs of people while respecting local regulations and rules and the values of our group. So it is finding the right balance, really. As for Air France KLM, and more specifically Air France, we have now reached our 11th 3-year agreement for disabilities. So for more than 30 years now, we have been careful about this topic. It is true that we are just at the beginning of an international approach, but in France, we are full-fledged here in this sector. Clearly, my desire is to use this French experience, not from a regulation standpoint, again, I repeat it, but for everything that is around it. You were mentioning structures. At Air France, there is a dedicated team who's working only on disability. And this is the guarantee that the agreement signed will be monitored, respected, that the concrete actions planned for will be implemented. Of course, with different stakeholders, people working in this sector, but also the HR people, the diversity and handicap correspondents in each department of the company, technical, industrial departments. So a very, very strong structure. In our sector, we give a lot of importance to organization and structure. So HR managers, disability correspondents, social partners who signed these agreements, and the valid one from 21 to 23, this is really our mindset. We want to use this to develop our international disability policy with, of course, similar references regarding the modification to workstations. Of course, we'll have to make an audit of the different situations in terms of accessibility of premises, as an example. But we fully share these values that for us are, I repeat, essential. And once again, if we cannot move the whole company, it's not our approach, at least in our teams, everyone should feel welcome, legitimate, comfortable, and should be able to do the job they have been recruited for. That's very simple. Well, let us try to be simple. Thank you, Marie-Pierre. We have just heard two testimonies from companies that have some experience in this sector, in integration policy. Jean-Rémy, what about LVMH? At LVMH, we have a rather similar policy. There are two things here. We have one specificity compared to the two previous testimonies. In all our communications, we insist on luxury and disabilities are compatible. This is specific to our business, really, because there could be prejudices. Okay, some candidates may say that's not for me. Okay, so this is part of our communication aspects for some years now. And there's another thing we'd like to use. I mean, here, 15% of the global population is suffering from a handicap. That's WHO figures. So something very common, in fact. So everything we're doing is just making sure that disabilities is something ordinary, because it is ordinary. And it's when we have low percentages in our companies that the situation is extraordinary, not ordinary. So this is my testimony from LVMH. Jean, I note that 3 different activity sectors have joint foundations in terms of values, mindset. What about TotalEnergies? We're not that different. To be inclusive for people suffering from disabilities is part of our values, the respect of the others. So we developed a disability policy in France for quite some time. Internationally, in 2018, we signed the OIT Charter. We wanted to give a joint definition for disability. We operate in 130 people, so we wanted to have a joint definition so that we know what we're talking about in order to build something in a humble way. And this is what has been recognized here. These situations are different, cultures are different, legislations are different. So we wanted our subsidiaries to be able to organize actions that do correspond to their cultures. So the step-by-step approach is really working for us.
Now, obviously, I hear positive messages. Now, I'm going to be a bit provocative, you know, that's my role here, I guess, but You have policies of physical adaptation, accommodation, virtual accessibility of infrastructures, of your shops, of the offices in which you work. What are the policies that work and those that doesn't work as well or doesn't work at all that you might want to change? Jean-Rémy, LVMH. Well, accessibility issue, I mean, we recently signed the ILO charter with 10 different principles, one being accessibility. So we decided to audit what we did in accessibility, and we started with digital accessibility. We just finalized an audit on this particular issue. We audited 20 brands of LVMH brand and products, home pages or HR pages, recruitment sites, and so on. So we realized there was a great variety in different situations. Some were adapted, others were not as well. And we are now going to help those who are late. We're going to help them develop digital accessibility systems. So that's the first point. And on physical accessibility, well, today we have more than 5,000 shops all over the world. The group has grown over the past few years, so we've opened new shops, and I cannot tell you that I've got an exhaustive vision of all those shops, you know, and accessibility for disabled customers. But this is also part of what we have to develop. This is part of the practices we want to develop in our shops. Camille, as you just explained, given the general policy in TotalEnergies, have you had obstacles? Have you, or what about accessibility problems, physical accessibility? Given the international footprint of the company, accessibility is probably difficult. Is it physical, digital? To be quite frank, we've had difficulties on both aspects of things. We are in 130 different countries, all sorts of different countries with different infrastructures. In Africa, for example, physical accessibility is difficult. We are also present in Asia. In Asia, by the way, Cambodia is 100% accessible in oil, in gas stations or offices. Some countries are doing better than others. In France, we have Just Beep, which is good. It works with what we call reduced mobility. It's an app. When you get to a gas station, you press a button and someone comes and helps you. This is something we are trying to develop. We've been developing it in France. We will try and share it with the rest of Europe at first. So we are doing a certain number of things, but we still have a lot to do. We must be aware of that. And digital accessibility, we're working on all sorts of different tools on a daily basis. Not everything is accessible, not yet, but we are progressing. We are doing better. And beginning of 23, we should have a reference document accessible, fully accessible, so everybody will be able to read these 600 pages of this reference document, Thank you, Camille. Karine, Camille just mentioned the great pleasure of being able to read 600 pages of a document, Given the nature of the business of Capgemini, maybe it's easier to implement, have governance policy. Digital accessibility is easier than physical accessibility, is it not? You talked about COVID. Had COVID an impact on accessibility, physical or digital accessibility in Capgemini? Well, COVID obviously was a turning point. From an accessibility viewpoint, and especially at my level, global level, it's easier to have an impact on digital accessibility. It's easier than having an impact on physical accessibility. We are present in so many countries. We have sites or more than that. So it has to be one of our commitments vis-à-vis disability. In France in particular, we signed an agreement with the social partners, so it's fundamental for us. We invest a lot with external partners to develop support and different tools. We can do better, obviously we can. I wanted, for example, to participate to an action. So we recruited a trainee. I couldn't have her in my office because I am in an old building, historical, which sort of private mansion, like, and all criteria were not didn't correspond to the nature of the disability of that particular young person. So we learned a lesson. Next time we'll be more careful about the criteria. Maybe I'll move to another site to be able to have these young disabled trainees. But from a digital viewpoint, it's easier. We work remote. We sometimes work 4 days a week from home. So it limits barriers to those who might need physical accessibility to work with us, to join us. And even for most people, the fact that we are now developing a major program, you know, we are going to make an analysis of all our sites, all our tools, make sure they're all accessible. It should take another 2 to 3 years. So we are going to work on that, and this will be good for everybody. An example, the fact that today, given a charter defined by the IKE group, we're working with the subtitles or transcriptions. Well, it's good for those who have hearing problems, but we write a lot in English, we work in English, and subtitles make things easier for those who might not be that fluent in English. So working on these tools with taking into account disability is fundamental. We're making major steps forward in the way people cooperate with one another in our group.
Merci, Karine.
Thank you, Karine.
Les grands esprits se rencontrent. Marie-Pierre.
Marie-Pierre.
On vient juste de mentionner maintenant. Les trois intervenants ont mentionné des problèmes.
Our speakers, our guests, just talked about problems they've had, physical accessibility issues that prevent proper interaction between members of the group or of the company. Given the specificities of air transport, what is your own approach here? Well, since we're talking about international level, not everything's perfect everywhere. I do confirm that. Accessibility of sales agencies or our Air France agencies, we have a limited number of them now because of the internet. People buy more and more their tickets on the internet, obviously. But nevertheless, those agencies, I haven't had a proper feedback, but they're all accessible. Airport terminals as well are accessible to people with disabilities, but our offices, the sites where we work are not all accessible. A month ago, I visited a country in Maghreb, and there were stairs and stairs only. It was not possible to have a lift. The site was such that we couldn't have a lift or anything like that. So it's a reality. It's a reality we are facing. And you talked about COVID, the impact of COVID, and obviously many delegations today have changed. They moved sites because they work from home. We have limited offices now. It was smart to actually have a smaller buildings, working sites. And thanks to that, we were able to take into account demands of accessibility, specific demands. I'm not talking about New York or North America in general. Even before COVID, those elements were already taken into account. But in some countries, you were talking about countries like in Africa, for example, it was not part, I wouldn't say it was not part of their priorities, but I would say that it was not an element that had actually been taken into account. And I think that today we have Abidjan, for example, they just moved into a new building, and now in that building, everybody can go to that building very easily. So COVID was the right opportunity to take all this into account at international level. It's interesting you're mentioning this point. It's quite interesting. If you remember, I talked about the 3 A's. First A, accessibility. Now, maybe we can talk about the second A, accommodation, adjustment. COVID required a new accommodation policy in order to adapt to this new way of working. So let me start with TotalEnergies, our friends from TotalEnergies. Camille, the adjustment policy, is it already up and running? I mean, I'm again talking about this accessibility policy. Some types of disabilities require an specific accommodation of the workstation, specific infrastructure, IT tools, and so on. Have you taken this into account in Total? Yes, yes, we are working on this on a daily basis. It's a key element. And on a daily basis, we support our staff, make sure that they have the right tools to work in the best possible situation. And when I say we, it's not only France. It's true in every country. In Poland, for example, they are offered to all their staff members to have a specific equipment. People with a disability are properly covered now, and you can have a better prevention. So Argentina as well has a good policy as far as support is concerned. They take into account transport costs, make sure that when you cannot take a bus, for example, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to go to your working site. Thank you, Camille. LVMH. You talked about an audit. Part of the audit, I mean, did you focus on accommodation of workstations, or what about retail shops and so on? We had an audit, it's a digital accessibility audit regarding accommodation or adaptation of workstations. We have a specific policy per country. We first identify a contact, someone in charge of disability. Second, we identify resources, depends on the size of the country. And once that has been done, we start communicating to employees. We can explain that we have a system that's up and running. And according to the countries in which we are, there are some mature countries, obviously, which have had an organization for years, Italy, France, Japan. But other countries are just starting, and they are still identifying resources. But things have started. If you don't know, well, we'll find an expert. The expert will help you identify partners for better recruitment, for workstation adaptation, and so on. This is a fundamental point. These are 3 key moments. Now, digital accessibility, it's more centralized. And very often, those who design a website or an app are usually centralized IT organizations. So we have identified them, and we can create sort of community of references. European approach, from a legal viewpoint, the European approach here is interesting for us. So we have a reference that monitor and control this network so that we can really move forward, identify what's well done, progress, and adapt. Karine.
Mentionné, à juste raison, j'imagine, l'intégration des politiques d'accessibilité.
You were talking about the integration of accessibility, or
chez Capgemini.
I mean, in Capgemini.
Après avoir vécu le Covid,
after the COVID period, your workstation adaptation policy, has it changed? Especially in a sector in which digital tools are fundamental. Yeah, we've talked a lot about physical accessibility or physical adaptation or with specific IT tools, but let me highlight adaptation. In other words, flexibility of working hours and managerial accessibility. It's very important. Many people have a disability which is not visible, it's not obvious. Some people have mental health problems, or they have other specific problems which are sort of not that obvious, and they want to find the balance. They want to find the proper way of communicating, of adapting their workload. They don't. It's not a question of IT tool, and this means a dialogue, a better dialogue. We must favor this type of dialogue, while obviously protecting confidentiality. These people very often want confidentiality. For example, in UK, and Italy is going to the same, in UK they have a passport. It's a very simple form. It's and the person in question can describe the situations in which they are in difficulties, the choices made, how they want to operate vis-a-vis the rest of the colleagues. For example, we have to, every day we must have a discussion about the objectives you expect from me every day. Autistic people might require this, or do not change orders all the time. Stick to what you're asking me. Explain why you change something in my workload and so on. So thanks to this passport, those people can describe those various situations that they face, and they can make suggestions as well to change or adapt things. So it's a constant discussion, exchange with management, with the rest of the team. People become aware of what's going on. They adapt. Very often we're talking about basic, simple things. Better plan the work of the team, or the timetable, or the way people work with one another. Now, our four guests have explained how they want to prepare their company, the structure, digital accessibility, physical accessibility. Now, companies, businesses are ready to have disabled people. How do you find those people on the market? Where are they? Where are they hiding? What about their training level? When you want to enter Capgemini or LVMH, Air France, Total, you need different talents, different profiles. You have different job descriptions. So how do you do? What works? What doesn't work? Again, I'm starting with TotalEnergies, how does it work? This is the main point. We have to be able to find the profiles we're looking for. In France, it's complicated. We don't always have the profile. Normally, we should be able to find, but it's not that easy. It's probably even more difficult at international level. In some countries in Africa, for example, it's very complicated. Because at first, people do not have access to education. We can't find the solution on our own. It should be a sort of, we should work together. How can we have different kids in schools? It's, you know, it's a long process. Unfortunately, we have no magical solution. So, but this is it. This is what we're talking about here. It's a key element. How can we develop in the countries in which we work, we operate? How can we develop this education? Well, how can we develop the education in the businesses in which we recruit? Camille, you're talking, what about, what are you doing at international level? Capgemini, it's an international group. Are you facing this issue, the gap that exists? This difference between the need of the company and the level of training, the level of education available on the market. In most cases, our recruits are young people just out of school or recent new graduates, and in the schools with which we work, we don't always have enough people with an issue. So we have to use other recruitment channels. We work with dedicated forums, for example, in France, or Pôle emploi in France, the unemployment agency. They are more and more active here. We also work with associations or third parties. In the US, for example, we have a program to integrate people with autism issues. So it's an association that works with us. They first integrate them. And then they get a long-time job, or we have our own levers in India, for example. We have been able to develop with local partners what we call digital schools, to develop digital competencies and skills to people who are sort of far away from, you know, who are in difficult situations, who are far away from jobs and even education. We have 40 of such associations. Some are fully dedicated to people with a disability, with young people in particular, to help them find their first job, to help them develop digital skills so that they can really find a job in Capgemini.
At Air France, and at Air France, Marie-Pierre, I can imagine that your needs in terms of education are different from Total or Capgemini. Well, yes and no, because we are part of the same fora, at least in France. I said it earlier on, we have 3-year programs, and the one that was signed last year in 2021 is planning for a budget so that we can retain people in their job, and also an objective regarding the number of people recruited. That's very clear. We have not mentioned indicators till now, but we really wanted to have figures, really. And indeed, given the crisis we have just experienced, more specifically in the air sector, we could have modified things, but it was not the case. We have 800,000 euros a year dedicated to employment retention and even transportation as well. So we had targeted 40 recruitments in 2021 and 23. will be over that figure, so that's rather good. And to answer your questions regarding skills and competencies, the 40 people recruited that happened or will happen in the coming weeks are for technical positions, really. Our industrial directorate managed to find skills for people who have been sponsored and then started as apprentices and then went on with a long-term contract. Same thing for the IT department. Again, we have profiles that do correspond to our needs. So there's no real difficulties for us. But as for France, internationally speaking, I would be not that sure. We still have a lot to do, apart from North America, Canada, North America, a little bit Mexico, but for the rest of the world, it's more complicated. And as for now, it's up to each of our delegations to assess the situation, to their goodwill, really. So this is what we should structure in the coming months and years. Jean-Rémy, Marie-Pierre was talking about local differences versus global approaches. And she also mentioned the integration policies should reflect the constraints of the countries. And we will all agree here on stage to say that the maturity level for integration policies in each company has an impact regarding the efficiency of recruitment. What about LVMH? As I was saying earlier on, we do have a country-by-country approach. So we work on the disability topic by country. We ask our brands to work together per country. There are also systems that we really are supporting, but as one we believe in strongly, which is partnerships between schools and companies. We have an internal companies for excellence jobs. We are operating in 7 countries where LVMH is, so it is working between school and the company. The objective is to fill the gap we see in some countries because some people with disabilities don't have access to graduation. So with our presence in countries, we'll be able to work on this diversity aspect, including disabilities. So all our countries should sign partnerships with schools after having identified those schools that are ready to work on disabilities, because it means premises, accessible training sessions. So there are some prerequisites, but once we have found those schools, we can have very interesting results independently from heavy systems. We're telling these countries, if you need, start a partnership with schools. Maybe you can start a traineeship. This is something that exists everywhere in the world. In all countries, you can have long traineeships leading to graduation and diploma. So it is a very nice way to prepare young people with disabilities to our jobs. Another experience is not developed in all countries, but in some, France and the US. We recruit just on the profile of people. We are open to everyone, notably people with disabilities, and we have a recruitment process that allows people to show their potentialities. We don't look at their resumes, we just put them in a situation, and the recruitment process will allow us to see what they can do. Well, they have to be prepared. We have to tell them a lot of things so that they can be ready for the interview. And then they have the best opportunities. In the US, we started such a system at Sephora in all our logistics centers. It is an 8-week program. It is open in each state where we have a logistics center. So 8-week program opened to each and everyone, whatever the disability. So after the 8 weeks, we can see if the person adapted and then is recruited at LVMH. So these are different methods in order to favor recruitment. And there are countries that have not moved forward enough on disabilities, or for which there's no shortage, as in some countries. So we're the first to go to schools, and then we can easily find candidates. Jean-Remy, unfortunately, you will have to keep the microphones. You talked about recruitment policies, and you mentioned the fact of positioning LVMH as an attractive employer for people with disabilities. How do you design your communication policies? Do you design them in order to position LVMH as an attractive employer market? Communication, of course, is connected to accessibility. Since we do not have yet the right level for IT accessibility, we are not at the level of a brand image to recruit people with disabilities. So it means that we need to move forward rapidly if we want to be consistent. Okay, we do have internal, external communications similar, and they do highlight the organizations I mentioned earlier on. The fact that we have handicap programs in some countries. We talk about accessibility offices and bureaus. This notion of a handicap, which is really French wording, is to be banished in all our international communication. Disabilities. Even in the US, they want to talk about different capabilities. So we had this debate in-house, and we said, no, okay, we talk about people with disabilities, so it means that they don't have any other competencies, so something very ordinary here. We shouldn't be ashamed of this. I don't know if this answered your question. Yes, indeed. Thank you. That's nice that you're talking about terminology here. It is indeed a very interesting topic for evenings by the fireplace. But when we talk about integration policies for people with disabilities, we talk about people with disabilities, differently abled people, but it doesn't change much regarding the integration of people with disabilities. So concretely, Marie-Pierre, at Air France, was the situation? Are you careful to terminology, the brand image of the company? What's the situation? Well, what is motivating our communication, whether internal or external communication? The motivation is respect. This is what is guiding us, really. Respect and diversity in its broadest meaning, going beyond disabilities. For the years, of course, we had a communication that was not inclusive enough. So we are very careful about it now. We got some comments from our clients, from our employees about that topic. They say things have changed. The images have changed. The images you're using in your communications have evolved. Now we see different people. We had somewhat a flat, stereotyped image in the past. So yes, for some years now, things have evolved. And of course, it's a very good thing. What about Capgemini? We are having questions about terminologies. When you translate from one language to another, you may be making mistakes, but we play on our word, on our name, and we also used capability because you have capability and Capgemini as well. Okay, so beyond this play on words, really. What is essential is to remain authentic in terms of communication. In other words, not to say that everything is easy, there's no obstacle, no. But we don't want to give a kind of a superhero, superpower approach to people with disabilities. So we need to find the right balance. And those people who talk best about it are those people with disabilities themselves. So when we do a campaign, they are always associated because some are very generous and strong enough to share their testimonies. And without talking about a specific case, they could give us very good advice on what is to be highlighted or not. So we go to them through our employee networks. We developed something that is capability teams that is existing in 12 countries, just the beginning, and we do hope it's going to blossom. But we want to work intelligently by integrating all their comments. What is important, as I said, is respect, but we would also want to change the look of people. There's not the disability people and the others. No, everyone is different, and this is to be considered. We must all be aware of that. And this change of look sometimes goes through disruptive actions. Very recently, this week, for the employment of people with disabilities, we organized a fashion show. So we have models with disabilities, different types of, and we highlighted the designs of a very specialized creator and designer. So something very much adapted to any type of disability. Spain organized a disability race. Everybody was welcomed, whatever their physical state and their disability. Everyone was running those 5 kilometers differently with the different times, of course, but we proved that everyone could join in such an event at their own pace with adaptations, but nobody was to be excluded or felt excluded. So what I hear is respect of individuals. Let us avoid the nice images. What about TotalEnergies? Did you hire Superman in wheelchairs, blind people who can see through walls? Well, no, we already have a lot. No, what we are trying to do is to really show those people we already have, because our best strength is our employees, and those people who can talk best about disabilities are those people who have disabilities. They are our best ambassadors, because beyond the official communication, there's also communication at the canteen table. And when I talk to my neighbor and tell them that the disability group helped me or the manager helped me, things move forward. And this is something I want to insist a lot. You want to put those people under the limelight, really, give them a voice. I heard a lot of different approaches, and I do think that if I am one of these people who are listening to us religiously, I hope, I heard a lot of positive aspects, successes, but also some issues you all met, either because it was not planned or because in terms of the company maturity, it was not the right level to reach your objectives. But now, what are your criteria to measure the success of your integration policies? Are these criteria based on figures, as was mentioned earlier on? Are these criteria based on value, or are they more holistic, since it is something more organic and less measurable? What's worked best Going back to TotalEnergies, well, we are an engineering company, so normally we like figures. In France, we do have figures. As for Air France, we measure our recruitment levels, our employment levels, we measure how much we spend. So we're very good on that, and we do like KPIs, so we're not at a loss. Internationally, we decided to work a little bit differently because the starting situations are different, cultures are different, and thus we are here want to collect good practices and share these good practices. A good indicator for us is that for the 3rd of December, we issued a race around the world for our handicap policies. It is a collection of all the good practices in each country and to share them so that people could get inspiration. This is the best indicator for us. And this is what Patrick said in his introduction. We want to make sure that, well, we have 41 company subsidiaries, so we want to say, will we have more by the end of 2023? And if it's the case, then we'll be winners. Ambitious objective, yes, very ambitious, but we all need to have ambitious objectives. Then it's up to my team to do it, so it works well. At LVMH, Jean-Rémy? Well, we signed the ILO Charter, 10 principles, 10 commitments, and last year we decided to set a quantitative objectives. We wanted to double the headcount of people with disabilities by 2025. We have 2 reportings, HR reporting. We ask countries to report the number of people with disabilities, and we have another CSR reporting where we ask the different countries to give us the different programs they implemented. Thus, we have a kind of broader approach. If we are not to do this, and to answer your question about our communication, if we do not measure, it will be complicated for us to really identify and assess the quality of the policy we wanted to post by signing the ILO Charter. So for us, this is key. Of course, it raises some issues. What about the definitions per countries may vary. There's the ILO definition, that of the UN. Many countries signed this charter of people with disabilities, but it stipulates that there are local barriers connected to culture and legislation. In other words, we must consider in our reporting system all these cultural differences. So the starting principle for us is that each country was to report according to that legislation and definitions. So maybe we are collecting here, I would say, carrots and apples, but we start from a rather homogeneous legislative base. Some people may have a shorter approach, or the US having a broader approach, but the starting base is the same. There are also chronic diseases that are not considered as a disability in some countries. If I take the example of China, if you go deep, really, we can realize that somebody suffering from a chronic disease could be considered as a person with a disability. But no people does it, really. So if we want to go into the nitty-gritty of things, really, we can agree and thus have a reporting system that allows us to measure our policies. Karine, you are nodding. I can easily imagine that you're going in the same direction. Yes. It is a multi-storied rocket here because the objective is to work with a maximum of employees. We have KPIs, the number of people with disabilities are working in a group, and again, we are using the definition of each country, but we don't have a homogeneous definition, but it's not really a problem. In a year, in 1 year, we increased their representation by 26%. Of course, the starting level was very low. So beyond recruitment, as we said earlier on, we want to have a global campaign. We want to encourage our employees to self-declare, really, not to improve our statistics and figures, but to make sure that they are supported on a daily basis and that we can retain them in their job positions and that we favor their future career development. On our KPIs, we have something that is key. That's how we can measure perception. Do people with disabilities feel well included, well integrated in a company? In 2021, we organized a global survey in 50 countries regarding the inclusion level. We're able to see the differences of perceptions per gender, per nature of disabilities. When people had accepted anonymously to report as a person with disability. But we have not noted any big gap between people with disabilities and not, just a few hundreds percentage point, really. So we were very satisfied, and it means that we were going in the right direction. And as I said, beyond figures and people, we are working with more and more people, more and more employees, so we can measure the audience of our webinars, of our in-house training sessions. The objective is to make sure that this culture for understanding what difference is does cascade down in the company. Marie-Pierre, you were the first one to mention the differences between France and the rest of the world, notably regarding the complexity of air transportation and in your various approaches, international approach, I mean. So what about the justifications of figures? Internationally, I would say we still have a lot to do. As for now, we do not have any KPI. Reference will be France, as I said earlier on. But as was also said by my colleagues, that will not be enough. A quantitative approach, that's nice, but we would also like to have a qualitative approach. And this is an approach that we find in the training sessions. You talked about developing the awareness of our managers with a manager's booklet for those people, those managers who have in their teams people with disabilities or who reported as such. One idea, as for now, we have about 36,000 employees at Air France, 3,800 pilots and 11,000 stewards and stewardesses. So 2,000 people about declared themselves or self-declared themselves as suffering or as having a handicap. So we do have social workers, we have also company GPs, so these people can talk to these medical staff anonymously, really. So they do the choice freely, really, I mean, to report themselves. And all this, no doubt, will mean that they will benefit from what we can offer in terms of job retention. And then we will develop indicators with figures. But what is essential is the quality approach. We have not made any survey, as far as I know, with the people with disabilities, at least internationally. But this is what I would like to do, because we need such a feedback. It will give us food for thought if we are to develop an international disability policy. Maybe this is the foundation for it all, really. I fully agree, yes. Now, You have listened to us for about an hour. It's nice for us to rest here on stage, and it's up to you to be more active. I mean, the audience. So you have listened to 4 companies, 4 different activity sectors, 4 different levels of maturity, and different policies being influenced by an international or a local environment. Now, the floor is yours. What is meaningful to you? What would you like to know more regarding those policies that have been presented by our 4 guests? Accessibility, accommodation, stereotypes, attitudes, culture? Up to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this conference. I work for ST Microelectronics, a very big international groups, maybe not as well known of the general public given our activities, but anyway, I have a question about the digital accessibility. You audit the system, you draft a charter, which is good, and what about what existed previously? What about the budget? You know, it costs money. It's sometimes not feasible. What about the construction, for example? You have new internet sites, probably, or so. What about the budget?
Oui, alors, pour nous, effectivement, enfin
as far as we are concerned, correcting or adapting a site which is not of an easy access is expensive. We have shops with 60–70% AA or AAA, and it means that, and I guess it depends of the bugs which have been identified, but we're talking here about something that can be improved. It's already fairly well configured. Now, if your level is only 20%, then forget about it and start again. That's our experience. Capgemini. Yes, we also use the same references. .AA or something like that. And we have audited all our apps, the one we developed ourselves and the one we bought outside the company. And obviously, in our plans, we focused on the most popular ones and those which are really fundamental in the career of the employee. We sort of tend to give priorities to those ones, but I agree with you once again. The business case doesn't exist sometimes, and if we have a level of inferior to 50%, maybe it's better to wait for future versions, you know, of these apps instead of trying to repair things. But anticipation here is what counts. So now we have an internal charter. All new applications which we develop or buy should correspond and meet the accessibility criteria. Otherwise, it's useless. We can't always repair or accommodate. We have to anticipate things as much as we can. Thank you, Karine. Are we answering your question? Okay, anything else? Any other question for Marie-Pierre or?
Oui, bonjour à tous, Hervé Bernard d'Handicap International.
Good afternoon, Hervé Bernard, Handicap International. We support companies to include people with disabilities. We have structures. We help people, like businesses like Michelin, Casino, Renault, and you were talking about the 3 A's. Now we tend to add 2 other A's, 2 other letters, leadership. It should be done by the top management. It should be carried, and the top management should give momentum. And the other important point is partnerships with local partners, in particular, local stakeholders, associations of disabled people, and so on and so forth. So can you confirm this? And it's a major challenge, isn't it, to have this to be supported at the highest level of the company. It's true for budget, and then you have to develop the relationship with local stakeholders. TotalEnergies. Yes, Patrick Pouyanné is really in that thing, you know, is very part of the game. So it's being helped and supported by the big boss, if I may say so, is important, obviously. It's very important. On partnership, I agree with you as well. These are key elements. As I said, we are big groups, but at the same time, we're small as far as this subject is concerned. So we have to work together to move things forward. And in best practices, we tend to put forward, we like to put forward associations with which we work. Sometimes in Africa, they will work with this or that association. Maybe you have the same thing in the neighboring country. So that's what we're trying to encourage. And without associations, we couldn't do it, obviously. Air France, what about you? Do you work like that? Oh, yeah, I totally agree, obviously. I'm totally in line with you. And when you say top management, it's being an example is fundamental. We can give directives, but if we don't show at the highest level of the company that this is something that people take at heart, it wouldn't last long, or it wouldn't, and then people would do something else, and that's it. Let me give you an example. Every year we organize duo days, as we call them. We invite young people. They spend one day in our company with managers, experts, and so on. They spend one day on specific activities, jobs. Patrick Stizon, our HR manager, had someone with him all day long. People said, no, but he won't find one day for this young person, but he did it, and this is striking. It's a message, you know, it's a strong message for the others. And then when you implement or organize a policy, it helps. This type of thing, of examples, will help you. And this is very important. A very good example. 8 hours of a day spent with like that. It's quite rare, and it helps. We don't have time for another question, I'm afraid. I'm a selfish guy, so I will allow one last short question. Slightly different question. You're talking about regulation, administration, and you're saying all this is usually a bit sophisticated, difficult to understand even. Now, I'd like to know something. You are in groups, you work at international level. Would you have one or two references of countries that use systems we could use ourselves, that have, you know, structures we could use ourselves? No answer? No? Okay. That was a good question. I'm not sure about the answer. I don't know, we've talked about the United States, but it's obvious, but it goes without saying, I should say, but number of delegations in New York, for example, it's beyond, it's more than that. It's a whole company that thinks differently vis-à-vis disability. So it might be complicated to export this type of example. And when I say complicated, I mean impossible. But we could, those places could become a source of inspiration. But let's not try and do things which are impossible because of regulation sometimes, you know. But anyway, as far as disability is concerned, we should be inspired by this type of cultures, by this type of approach, where there wouldn't be any difference, whatever the type of diversity, disability or anything else. They don't make a difference. Everybody should be able to work with all the necessary tools, could do their jobs on a daily basis peacefully and easily. I don't know. Okay, that was an example that came to my mind. Oh, we could talk about that, I guess, for hours. But we have the parties waiting. Unfortunately, we are 1 minute away from the end of this session. Maybe we can go on talking around a drink later on. I would like, in 1 minute max, our guests will maybe give you a recommendation to all of you who encouraged us here with your presence. Anything you'd like to share, any recommendation you'd like to share with the rest with the audience? My recommendation would be adopting an international policy around disability is difficult, but it's demanding, but it's worth it. You have to be convinced. You have to be convinced by what you do. Sometimes you have the feeling it's useless, and then all of a sudden, someone at the other different country say, oh, this is great, this is what happened, this is what we did, and it will be convinced.
Moi, j'aurais une recommandation qui est
a short recommendation, a profile of the people you would appoint or you want to appoint as manager or expert in this disability policy, someone who is open to different cultures. It's important. You don't develop this type of policy without having such a profile. Be open to international cultures, and so that you make these policies efficient. Don't be locked into regulations or legal systems, even if they exist, obviously. Give people a chance. Give different. You don't have one type of disability. Everybody is different, and we have to work with this type of logic. We have to be flexible. People should find, should be admitted by others, should be recognized by others. Openness, be open, and be decided, you know, be convinced. You have to be convinced, be loyal as well to your ideas, to your values. This is important, whatever the regulation, whatever local regulations, and be humble. One step after the other, small steps, but don't do it. Don't resist and move forward, step by step. Thank you for your open mindset, for your enthusiasm. So let's have a round of applause for our guests. I also hope that you enjoyed the experience. I hope that you can now go back to your to home, or be motivated with motivation, do what you have to do, whatever your role is. I hope that you're not afraid by disability anymore. Don't look at disabled people as disabled people, but as someone else, like anybody else. I hope that when you next meet me, you won't say, oh, it's the guy in a wheelchair, but you will, if you could remember my name, that will be a major step forward as well. And do this on a daily basis in all your inclusion policies. Disability is not your problem. My disability is my problem. Look at me as someone. That's it. Thank you.